The ongoing bird flu is ravaging the chicken population, driving up egg prices from about $2 for a dozen eggs last fall to now $8. Yikes. It's a big jump. And while overall inflation has continued from, of course, the prior administration, and while President Trump has only been in office for 1 month, this is one of the promises he has not kept yet. On TikTok, we've seen this, people invoking Donald Trump's many vows to lower exactly these kind of prices.
What? Oh, nothing. I'm just wondering how you're doing with those egg prices. Well, here you are asking about the egg prices. You know that there's the bird flu going on, and that is Biden's fault. I'm just saying that the availability of eggs and the price is not President Trump's fault. Oh, you mean the prices of eggs that y'all definitely said were Vice President Harris's fault during the campaign trail?
Now a dozen eggs will cost you around $4 thanks to Kamala Harris's inflationary policies.
Didn't Trump say on day one he was going to lower prices?
Didn't he say that? He did.
And I went on groceries. It's a very simple word, groceries. Like almost, who uses the word? I started using the word, the groceries.
A vote for Trump means your groceries will be cheaper.
It'll also bring your grocery bill way down. I have more complaints on groceries.
Now, those grocery bills, they're not down. They're not level. As you're seeing from the reporting and the prices, they're up. And Americans are feeling this with reminders that, of course, reflect the problem, as well as Trump's lack of any solution so far, which brings us, as mentioned, to something that people live. This is not partisan politics. This is how things are going in the real world when you're out living your life. If you want to, for example, get a reasonably priced meal at a mainstay like Denny's. This set of developments does not mean that all problems under the Trump administration are somehow caused by the Trump administration. Indeed, I can say to you tonight, America, the question is often asked. Which came first? The chicken or the egg? Or as one poet put it, dealer or victim, I beg, what came first, moving chickens or the egg? Well, tonight's question is related. What came first? The bird or the egg prices? The bird flu or these cracked eggs of budget cuts? The metaphor may be difficult. The answer is simple. Bird flu did come first, along with wider rising prices over the past few years. And that, of course, is before Trump's election. But just as Trump struggled in his first term with the COVID response, he is struggling with this part of the job already now. Nonpartisan financial outlets, again, no agenda against MAGA, but they're reporting on President Trump's clear lack of interest in governing or solutions on these type of challenges. Trump's mass firings, gutting the expert staff that, for example, was doing bird flu response, which Bloomberg calls a stunning bureaucratic measure of incompetence, so blatant they're now, quote, scrambling to hire back some of those workers they fired. And food safety is the government's job, whether Trump finds that interesting or not, whether that drives the right press coverage or not. Trump and Musk continue to test the limits of how to fire all kinds of people, including the experts who do this work, who have the expertise, who are on the job. So Trump and his staff, in this case Musk, will be held accountable sooner or later for the results. More broadly, these are problems that come as the American consumer confidence is sinking, the largest monthly drop in over 4 years. So that shows concerns beyond even these recent economic problems under the past administration. Now, everyone knows voters famously hold presidents accountable for the economy. That's why President Bush could literally win a war and then quite quickly lose an election. It's why James Carville's maxim, "It's the economy, stupid," has endured for decades. Even as everything around us, from politics to media to technology, seems to be changing, we still hear, and boy, does it still ring true, it's the economy, stupid. A lot of experts say those high prices over the last couple of years drove an inflated or higher opposition to the Biden-Harris administration. And that helped Trump eke out his 1.5-point national win. just late last year. So what came first? The chicken of this Trump second term or the egg of high prices? It's a tortured metaphor for a tortured time. And people seem angry in red districts and these protests as they watch President Trump come back after everything I just showed you and all those promises and then side with billionaires and plan tax cuts and firing all these people, some of whom are working on your food safety, others who might just be your neighbor, your fellow peer. Just a lot of firings. And all of that being prioritized over any apparent effort to fulfill the campaign vows about the prices in the economy. And let's be clear. I've told you before, there's a valid debate about the size of government or future budgeting. Congress is having budgeting discussions tonight about the future. But taking people who've already been hired to do these jobs in a bipartisan process and firing them all indiscriminately and cutting all these jobs across America, well, it doesn't play well. Even if, as Musk likes to say, they're government jobs, like that's automatically worse. Note what you see on your screen. The Trump-Musk effort targets over 900,000 jobs across red states alone. The impact there, if you want to look at it politically, is broad. And people are already, even in this algorithmically challenged spin world we're in, somehow people are getting the facts that so many of the cuts were so incompetent they had to be reversed, which means if you only believe Donald Trump, you still found out that Donald Trump and his administration did something really wrong recently because now they're doing the opposite. And that's what some of these headlines show. So we're seeing the beginning of a partial backlash. The layoffs playing poorly for one Republican congressman in Missouri who actually stood up and faced the public, which is somehow how we know this. Imagine how many are just hiding out or trying to avoid moments like this. And I want you to note before I play this for you, this is a district where the Republican didn't win by 1.5 points like Trump's national margin or 5 or 10. The Republican in the district here won by 45 points and is now getting booed.
There are jobs available. God has a plan. You are not a victim, you are a victor. And you will be able to get another job and provide for yourself and your family. I'm confident of that.
We are the hardworking federal employees that make this government run every single day. Yep. And we are being discounted by those in Washington.
Real people facing this, talking back. And again, you can do all the spinning online that you want, but sooner or later, when you're talking about real world impacts from food and nuclear safety to those people I just showed you out in communities, out in those red states I just showed you, and blue and purple, people will hear about this. This is part of our lived reality, just like the egg prices. Now, Elon Musk is pushing a very particular attack on federal workers. It has an argument to it. And again, there's been many debates about bureaucracies and the so-called, quote, deep state, and many of these things have different ideological angles. But let me tell you how it works here. Musk is trafficking in a very specific attack, which argues federal workers are basically illegitimate and expendable. They must justify themselves by email to his billionaire demands, which implies that somehow otherwise they'd be unjustified. Say you're doing bird flu research or nuclear safety. Now you got to turn around and spend time writing down to Elon Musk what you do on the nukes like he understands it. That's a demand even the Trump White House backed off of. But while the federal workers I mentioned are part of these wider protests we're seeing, and some of the Republicans who still say they want Donald Trump to succeed are warning how doing these cuts the wrong way or too broadly can actually stop the Republican Party in its tracks. You know, Elon Musk might not have been following U.S. politics back then, but Bush's second-term momentum was hobbled very infamously by the failed effort to change and cut Social Security. Social Security is just a very popular part of the long-term safety net, along with Medicaid. And former Trump campaign chair Steve Bannon is well aware of the risks exactly on this point.
Get into Medicaid. Medicaid, you got to be careful because a lot of MAGAs on Medicaid. I'm telling you, if you don't think so, you are dead wrong. Medicaid's going to be a complicated one. Just can't take a Medex to it, although I would love to.
He'd love to, but politically, he doesn't want Trump, who he helped elect the first time back when he had smaller support in the party, and the Republicans that Bannon works with now. He doesn't want them to lose their power in a quest that would also fail. Taking a big risk like Bush did and not getting the thing you want is usually ineffective politics and governance. So that's kind of a lot. Here we are. In all reality, it is way too early to tell whether some of these voters have a full-blown buyer's remorse for Trump. There are signs of concern from the politics you just saw, to the widening anger, to the huge crash in consumer confidence. But if it's not buyer's remorse, it's definitely sticker shock, with some consumers in need of retail therapy for their choices, from the shopping market to the political markets. And it's no secret that most people in the United States, if you peel away all the partisan stuff, and remember where we started last year, most people opposed the political choices being offered at the beginning of that year and through most of the campaign. We reported that at the time. I even made a Daft Punk reference about one more time and showed the polling that majorities in both parties wanted other choices. And so faced with that choice, and then, of course, the late swap that we got, so instead of the Biden-Harris agenda, you got the Harris agenda with limited time, people veered towards Trump for a bundle of reasons that included what I'm reminding you of tonight, what we saw from real people in those protests and those videos. It included the promise, the reasoning for what was a 1.5-point election was change and lower prices. Well, here we are just over a month in, and people are not getting lower prices yet. And many are finding these indiscriminate cuts, from food safety to nuclear safety to all of their peers in all of those red states, hardworking people losing jobs and having less money to spend in their local economies. People are finding that is not the change they had in mind.
A post hosted on the social media network owned by the world's richest man, who, as an aside, is on a crusade to slash and burn the government down on behalf of Donald Trump. That post basically sums up where we are right now. The complete transformation of the United States Justice Department, better than anything or anyone else. It's a post from the U.S. Attorney's Office in Washington, D.C., currently helmed by election denier and Trump super ally Ed Martin. And it's about the Associated Press's lawsuit seeking press access to the White House. It says this, quote, "As President Trump's lawyers, we are proud to fight to protect his leadership as our president, and we are vigilant in standing against entities like the Associated Press that refuse to put America first," end quote. Now, grammatical errors aside, the whole thing is truly amazing from start to finish. But it's the first few words that have caught everyone's attention, because prosecutors paid by the taxpayers who work at the U.S. Attorney's Office in Washington, D.C., are not Donald Trump's lawyers. U.S. attorneys work for us. They take an oath to the Constitution, not to Donald Trump or any specific president. Senator Chris Murphy said this, quote, "This is insane. If you wonder why some of us think the rule of law is about to fall, it is this. It's that attitude that anyone in the Justice Department is a personal attorney for Donald Trump. They're only to push his agenda and not the interests of the country or justice. That attitude now defines the top of the institutions currently responsible for upholding the rule of law in the world's oldest democracy, full stop." New York Times has brand new reporting on the number 2 person now running the FBI. He's a podcaster and media personality named Dan Bongino. From that reporting, quote, "Mr. Bongino's rise in the world of conservative news media was fueled by what critics describe as a penchant for spreading misinformation about the pandemic, about the 2020 election, and about the FBI. In 2022, he was banned by YouTube for repeatedly violating that platform's rules about coronavirus misinformation, including for a video that claimed that masks were useless. When Rudy Giuliani, the former mayor of New York, appeared on Bongino's show in November 2020, he made an outlandish claim asserting that voting software from Dominion Voting Systems was secretly being misused. Last week, he reprised a pet topic, the FBI investigation into whether the 2016 Trump campaign conspired with Russia in its efforts to influence the presidential election. Quote, "I don't want to move on from that case," Bongino insisted last week. Quote, I want to find out what happened so it can never happen again. Bongino should ask one of his colleagues. A bipartisan Senate intelligence report authored by now America's Secretary of State, a guy named Marco Rubio, found that the Trump campaign's ties to Russia posed a, quote, grave counterintelligence threat, end quote. And a special counsel investigation into the origins of the Russia probe failed to find any criminal wrongdoing by high-level FBI or intelligence officials. But the facts have always been, you know, not that interesting, completely secondary, if of note at all, for Trump allies, people like Bongino, whose claims of weaponization have fueled an alarming distrust among the MAGA voters and a purge of the Justice Department and the FBI workforces. Here's former federal prosecutor Brendan Ballou on the Hill today.
The actions of the past month should concern us all, largely ending foreign bribery and corruption cases and threatening to fire public corruption prosecutors, investigating political enemies while putting political friends above the law. These are all efforts to return us to the time of Watergate, and it harms you no matter your political beliefs. The only people who will benefit from these actions will be billionaire criminals. And for them, this will be a golden age.
So where we start today with some of our favorite experts and friends. Former acting attorney general under George W. Bush, Peter Keisler, joins us. With us at the table, former top official at the Department of Justice, MSNBC legal analyst Andrew Weissman's here. Also joining us, former Republican Congressman, MSNBC political analyst David Jolly's here. Peter, I start with you. I saw your really powerful, make me stop in my tracks comments on 60 Minutes, and I just wanted to expand on your analysis about where we are right now and how it differs even from where Trump tried to take the Justice Department when he was first there.
Well, we've seen a whole series of actions over the past 4 weeks that are really unprecedented. I mean, it started on day one of the new administration when the president pardoned everyone who had stormed the Capitol on January 6th, including people who had engaged in really brutal acts of violence against the law enforcement officers that were just trying to protect the Capitol. It went on when they fired more than 24 career prosecutors, some who had worked on the cases against President Trump himself and some who had worked on cases against the January 6th defendants. Again, in that instance, there was no suggestion that any of them were individually poor performers or had committed any individual act of misconduct. It was just that as a group, they weren't seen as sufficiently politically reliable. And then after that, we had the effort to drop the corruption case against Mayor Eric Adams because he said that he would assist the president in implementing the president's immigration agenda, and the Justice Department said that they wanted to better enable him to do that. Those are all distinct actions, but there's a common through line that connects them all, which is all of them treat law enforcement as just another tool of politics, where a president's friends and political allies get special favors and his perceived political opponents get special scrutiny and harsher treatment. And that's just the opposite of the equal and impartial justice that we've always thought of as a core value of the system.
And so what happens when the system becomes something else? I mean, I want to play the devil's advocate a little bit and say that Donald Trump ran on doing this. And he installed people in Pam Bondi, Todd Blanche, and Kash Patel, and then the U.S. attorneys. Those are all Senate-confirmed positions at the Department of Justice, right?
That's correct.
And none of them denied that they would pursue the president's agenda at the department. So I wonder what you make of the whole conspiracy to turn the Department of Justice that includes every Republican senator who voted for all those people who said they would do this. How do you evaluate this moment when the Republicans in the Senate are complicit in turning it into what you just described?
Well, that's part of the problem. You know, at the end of the day, a president has vast powers. I mean, sometimes he can cross the legal lines, but even when he's staying within the legal lines, there's an enormous amount that he can do for good or for bad. And when he has the Congress on his side, there are going to be very, very few restraints. And as to whether the people chose this, I really doubt that there were many people who voted for Donald Trump for any number of reasons who said, what I want is a Justice Department that favors his political friends and turns an especially harsh spotlight and scrutiny on his political enemies. Nobody voted for that.
I agree with you. I guess my point is a lot of people were warning that this is what he would do because this is what he tried to do in the first term. And my wonder is not really with Donald Trump 2.0. It's with why men like John Thune and John Cornyn confirm people from Bondi to Blanche to Patel who didn't say, I'm going to get there and try to stop him from turning the world's preeminent Department of Justice, the people who helped make sure 9/11 never happened again, the people who help other countries prevent terrorist attacks and stop child sex trafficking and stop drug cartels. Why do you think those men and women in the Senate on the Republican side didn't stop the department from heading this direction?
Well, look, I think there are political scientists who could opine on that more effectively than I can, but I guess what I would just say is that I think there are a lot of people there who privately understand the problems this creates, but are concerned about the political consequences for themselves. I don't think we have had a president in my lifetime who so completely dominated his party and who so much wanted at the same time to take the Justice Department and the FBI in this political direction. And I think that combination has been really toxic.
Can you just explain what happens inside the department, how it impacts? I mean, I think people at the highest level of the department probably make 1,000 decisions before lunchtime, and it's their judgment that keeps us safe, that keeps the bad guys running from U.S. Department of Justice offices all over the country and all over the world. How does it change how career folks do their job or approach their job when the weaponization is so publicly stated as the new mission?
Well, I think the fact that it's publicly stated is really part of the design. I mean, everything we've been talking about so far, the pardons, the firings, the dropping of the charges against Mayor Adams, the statement by Ed Martin that you put on the screen earlier that says he's the president's lawyer. I mean, all of those were very deliberately done publicly and transparently. And I think what they're designed to do is to send a message to the whole workforce that people, if they want to keep their jobs, need to be perceived as being part of the president's team. And that, of course, foreshadows attempts to use the department more aggressively as an instrument of politics. It's just another part of the president's political apparatus. Now, the people at the department are really dedicated to the notion that justice needs to be impartial and apolitical. They know that to be fair and effective and credible, the law enforcement system has to be nonpartisan. But it is extremely difficult to work in an environment in which all the signals around you are saying that if you want to keep a job, you've got to play on our team.
Tell me what you did last week or get fired. No, don't do that. Yes, do that. If you don't, then you're fired or semi-fired. But wait, it was all just a test and you failed. You failed. So here's one last. Tell me what you did last week. No, don't do that. Are you confused? Because I am. I was confused trying to write that today, trying to make sense of the back and forth. And I'm trying to make sense of this from the outside. Imagine if you were on the inside. Imagine if you were a federal worker trying to figure out who exactly to listen to right now. Is it Elon Musk? Is it Marco Rubio? Is it Kash Patel? Is it HR? Donald Trump? It beats me. And now to add to the confusion, there's a mass resignation, except this time it's DOJ staffers who are collectively calling it quits. 21 of them signing on to a letter that says DOJ is putting the country in danger, saying, quote, we will not use our skills as technologists to compromise core government systems, jeopardize American sensitive data, or dismantle critical public services. We will not lend our expertise to carry out or legitimize DOJ's actions. So what in the world is going on? Joining us now, NBC News White House correspondent Vaughn Hilliard, NBC News Chief Capitol Hill correspondent Ryan Nobles, and MSNBC legal correspondent Lisa Rubin. Vaughn, I truly do not understand what is happening right now within the federal government. And if you are a federal worker, who you're supposed to be listening to, whether Donald Trump and Elon Musk are on the same page, and whether Donald Trump is actually secretly saying things behind the scenes to other government heads. Can you make any sense of this?
I think that through all of this, it's so important that we take into the context, Katie, the number of government workers, myself, I know you, other colleagues have talked to, that say that there is anger, there is concern, there is consternation and confusion just to do their daily work. And the execution of that work at a time where their friends and colleagues have either been fired, placed on administrative leave, or have been left in limbo. And those that are still existing are trying to figure out whether to reply to an email or not. And in the case of Phil Sussman, he is a 10-year Army veteran who served in one of his tours in northern Syria. I just talked to him a few moments ago. He was working at USAID. He actually moved his family here in Washington, D.C. to work in the Middle East Bureau of USAID on the Syria desk. His family home in Florida, in St. Petersburg, was washed out in a hurricane last year, and he started this job in November. And just last night, late last night, I talked to him just about an hour after he received a termination letter. And I want to read one line to you, Katie, here. In his termination letter, it said very specifically, quote, I am terminating you on the basis that it is in the best interest of the U.S. government. I asked that Army veteran, Phil Sussman, about what that message meant to him and his message to not only President Trump, but Elon Musk. Take a listen.
I think that there are consequences to the things that are happening right now. And we may not feel it now, and most of the country may not even feel it now, but we all will at some point. And I think it's important that we put a face, we put faces on what's happening. These are real American lives being lost right now. This isn't a meme. This isn't a tweet. This is myself and my wife and my 3 children who don't know how we're going to pay the mortgage next month. You know, this is someone that has spent people that I work with that have spent their entire lives dedicated to helping others, sacrificing for others. I worked with an Afghan immigrant. She came over as a child, and her entire life has been about supporting the United States and our mission overseas and helping others. And she's losing her job. We're all losing our job. The people that truly care, like the selfless members, like some of the most selfless members of our society. You know, as selfless as any person I ever worked with in uniform carrying a gun, the people I worked side by side with in USAID, who truly cared, and we're casting them aside, and we're saying that you don't matter.
Phil Sussman said it's about more than families like his own or the other thousands of employees, Katie. But he said, for instance, in his position, he worked as effectively a liaison between USAID and the partners on the ground distributing humanitarian aid in Syria. There is now a void because of his termination. It's stories like that here that I think will increasingly rise to the forefront of this conversation as we watch Elon Musk effectively go through and continue this purge of federal workers across the federal government.
Hearing from him and hearing that he's going to struggle to pay the mortgage next year, I mean, that is a human face on this. At the same time, you hear that, you see Elon Musk running around with a chainsaw and laughing about how they're cutting government workers and claiming that all these folks are corrupt. And you just saw, you know, one of the people that got laid off right there, putting, again, a human face on this, not a meme, as he said. Ryan, you're also getting a lot of blowback for lawmakers, Democrats and Republicans, Democrats who want Democrats to stand up and be louder about this and to fight harder, and Republicans facing voters in town halls who say, I'm sorry, I didn't elect a king. I elected a guy who would be a part of a system of government, and you're the other guy or gal I elected, and you're a part of that system too. What are you doing? Why are you abdicating your responsibility? Has any of that feedback come back into the halls of Capitol Hill? Any changes that you're seeing?
I think, Katie, what we're seeing develop right now is at least a degree of mild criticism from a very small group of Republican members, not necessarily about the end goal for Elon Musk and the Doge operation, but the way that they're going about implementing it. And I do think it is in part, as you rightly point out, the heat that they're taking in these public town halls, the volume of calls that they're getting to their offices as well. And what we saw play out here today is that you are now, and something that we couldn't find a week ago, 2 weeks ago, a month ago, people willing to criticize the administration's process here, saying that they need to go about trying to execute this goal of reducing the federal workforce with a little bit more dignity, with a little bit more grace. Take a listen to what some of them had to say.
I'm all for trimming the government, but I'm all for also doing it in a deliberate manner that allows people to adjust in their lifestyles.
Look, I think they need to be more targeted and they need to be more thoughtful. I think so. Things are happening a little bit too fast and furiously, I think, and that's why we've had some of these unintended consequences.
Just a little bit of humanity and dignity to the process, I think, is what many of the Alaskan federal employees are asking for, and I don't think that that's asking for too much.
And that's Lisa Murkowski there at the end from Alaska, who I spoke to yesterday. And she was very interesting in the way that she went about this. She said that that email that you were talking about earlier, Katie, was intimidating for these federal government employees, and that these are the folks that make sure that our wildfires don't grow out of control in our nation's forests. They're the ones that are trying to research drugs to try and cure ALS. She had a long list of these things that she says federal government workers are on the front lines trying to fix and protect. And she said the way that they're being treated right now just is unfair, and this is not the way to go about completing this mission of making government more efficient.
Yeah, the second lawmaker there saying that, I just threw my pen across the table. The second lawmaker there saying that these are unintended consequences. I think that the issue here is that these are the intended consequences. If you're somebody like Elon Musk, they intentionally are not doing this surgically. I keep saying surgically. No, they're just doing this. They're taking a hammer to all of it. They're taking a chainsaw, as Elon Musk was waving around. The other weird thing that I don't have a good answer for is who exactly is running the show here. It appears to be Elon Musk, but the White House won't say it is. And then today, Caroline Leavitt was asked this again by a reporter, and here's what she said.
Can you tell us who the administrator of Doge is?
Again, I've been asked and answered this question. Elon Musk is overseeing Doge. No, Elon Musk is a special government employee, which I've also been asked and have answered that question as well. There are career officials at Doge. There are political appointees at Doge. I'm not going to reveal the name of that individual from this podium. I'm happy to follow up and provide that to you. But we've been incredibly transparent about the way that Doge is working.
They've been incredibly transparent, but they cannot name the individual in charge of Doge, the administrator, from that podium. I'm sorry, Lisa, is this a national security position? Is this person working undercover? Is there a reason why their identity can't be known by the American public?
I don't think so. And Katie, you and I both know that every 4 years, the identity of thousands of political appointees is revealed in something called the Plum Book, which gathers up people of that status or designation. The other thing that's really interesting is that not only can the White House not tell the press corps who the administrator of Doge is, but yesterday in a Washington federal courthouse, a DOJ lawyer also couldn't say who the Doge administrator was. Judge Colleen...
Couldn't say or wouldn't say?
Could not say. Did not have that information at their disposal. They were asked what Mr. Musk's role was with respect to Doge. And the Department of Justice lawyer said, all I can say is he's a close advisor to the president. But when asked and pressed who the administrator of Doge was, the person did not know. And I think that's by design. I think they are making this up in some respects as they go along because they do not want Elon Musk to have to be a defendant to some of these lawsuits. You and I both know, and we've been tracking, a variety of different lawsuits against Doge, including with respect to their access to payment system information. That's what this hearing yesterday was about. But if you can't even name the proper defendant, you can't get off the floor. You can't get...
Can't there be a lawsuit to get a name? I mean...
Yeah, sure. You can name a Doe defendant, for example. You can say Katie Tur versus John Doe number 1.
What about Katie Tur versus the Department of Government Efficiency?
Sure. But I think what they are trying to do here is sort of obfuscate who is actually running Doge and what Doge is, because in most cases, an agency that has the power that Doge does needs to be run by somebody who is Senate confirmed. And as we all know, That person is not Elon Musk.
You know, we try in this show to give you information, to straighten things out, to help you understand a moment, to take what is confusing and to make it understandable. And I'm leaving this segment now more confused than when I started it. I guess that is by intention.
Well, mixed signals and no backing down from Dan Bongino, the right-wing podcaster picked to serve as the new deputy director of the FBI. The former Secret Service agent has referred to the FBI as irredeemably corrupt. But while he suggested he's prepared to relinquish that MAGA warrior role, he also repeated a frequent and baseless charge that the DOJ has been weaponized.
I get it if you were a political opponent of mine that has been involved with proudly celebrating a weaponized justice system, how you don't understand how a guy like me who discusses partisan content in an opinion show can go and do a unquestionably nonpartisan job.
An NBC News review found that since 2017, Bongino's podcast has mentioned the FBI or deep state more than 21,000 times. Joining me now, NBC News Justice and Intel correspondent Ken Dilanian, along with Christopher O'Leary, former senior official at the FBI. Ken, I know you've been reporting on reaction inside the FBI over the choice of Bongino, including those who have told you that in many ways they think the deputy role is even more important than the director role. So talk about the kinds of concerns they're expressing to you.
Yeah, especially when you have a director like Kash Patel, who has no experience in the FBI, who is himself a partisan warrior with a history of criticizing the FBI. Agents were hoping that they would bring in a career FBI agent, as been true for the 117-year history of the Bureau, to be in the deputy role. The deputy actually runs operations. But instead, they brought in another partisan MAGA warrior. And not only that, somebody who has made baseless charges. I mean, just a few months ago, Chris, Dan Bongino accused the FBI of covering up the fact that he said that they knew who the suspect was who placed the pipe bombs outside the RNC and DNC the day before January 6th, after the FBI issued a public call for information saying they had no suspects. Dan Bongino said it's an inside job, it's a cover-up. That's just extraordinary. There's no evidence for that. He's accusing the FBI of being corrupt there, and now he's going to be the deputy director leading this organization. That's not a matter of opinion. That was a false charge that he made without evidence, and that's gotten a lot of people very concerned, Chris.
Chris, you spend a lot of time inside the building at the FBI. You know a lot of folks who still work there. Does it matter that the number one and number two don't have any FBI experience?
Well, it does, and the combination of the two is the really the most concerning part. So the deputy is supposed to have all of this operational experience at every level of the FBI across multiple types of threats, from counterterrorism, counterintelligence to violent crime. The director rises through the ranks and develops a network and leadership capability and understanding of the network and the interagency as they rise through the ranks. He's done none of that. It's great that he had a short career in the NYPD, working crime on the street level, but then he did protection for the Secret Service for a few more years. He's never done any investigations, nothing in national security, nothing working with the interagency. And the more problematic thing, the lack of experience coupled with his lack of suitability, his character flaws. I mean, there is no way that you're going to put 21,000 allegations back in the box against the FBI. So he's being rewarded with taking the helm at the FBI as the deputy after undermining the trust and confidence in its employees and the organization, the institution as a whole, for the last few years.
You know, there's one thing to talk about experience, but with that experience comes respect. Maybe even if you don't like the guy himself, right? If it's somebody who's been inside, who understands the working of whether it's the FBI or any other complex agency. But my limited experience around the FBI, these are not easy jobs. These are not places where you go, you clock in, and you leave, particularly for the front-facing people who are doing the investigations, the lawyers you and I were talking about in the break. How do you lead an agency? How do you run an agency without the respect of the people who are in it? And is it possible to win their respect, do you think, in this case?
So I don't think it's possible for him to win the respect of your average FBI agent or intelligence professional. Rob Cassane or Brian Driscoll, if they would have been asked to stay aboard as the deputy director, they would have enjoyed that. They have incredible reputations based on their work, based on operations. While Dan Bongino was running a podcast out of his basement, Rob Cassane was in East Africa with me. Brian Driscoll was in Syria with me hunting down ISIS. They built up a resume based on work and partnerships. They're trusted teammates. And people know that they would go to bat for them, looking out for their welfare. They already demonstrated that. Nobody has any trust and confidence in Dan Bongino to do that. He clearly lacks the integrity to do that. He's demonstrated that. And he really doesn't believe in the FBI and its mission. My concern is they're looking to dismantle it.
So, Ken, you and your colleagues have been digging into Dan Bongino's years-long history of pushing conspiracy theories, criticism of the FBI. To Chris's point, that is a question a lot of people have. Is Dan Bongino there to run an agency or to dismantle it? What do his words over the past many years tell us about that?
Well, Chris, he has actually suggested, particularly after the Mar-a-Lago raid, he said repeatedly that the FBI should be disbanded. Irredeemably corrupt was the phrase that you cited. He said it's beyond repair, essentially. Now, he's not saying that right now, and, we'll have to see how it goes, but it's clearly they have two people now in charge of the FBI at the senior-most positions who have spent years denouncing the FBI and painting the specter of a deep state, a cabal within the FBI, without any evidence of that. And so now they're confronted. Now they're going to be inside. They're going to be running the place. Dan Bongino, the first time he's in public with reporters, he's going to be asked, well, can you tell us the name of the pipe bomber? You said that the FBI was covering that up, right? So he's either going to have to come clean and explain to his followers that the conspiracy theories he was trafficking in are false, or he's going to have to. It's going to be a total contradiction. So we'll have to see how it plays out.
Well, there's another option there, Chris, which is what we saw, for example, in the false theories that the 2020 election was stolen. We have evidence coming. We have tons of information. We have lots of evidence. They never actually showed it, right? But do you see that scenario happening? And how do you answer that?
So on day one, he's going to meet agents just like me. I was your average FBI agent. I'm a former Marine, a combat veteran who spent his entire life dedicated to this country, its protection, and the security of its citizens. Politics never entered into it. As a matter of fact, like most FBI agents, I'm probably a little more right-leaning, and I'm not a registered Republican, but I could very well be. Politics are never discussed. So he's going to meet people just like me and be confronted with the truth, which Kash Patel already knows. Dan Bongino is actually going to be confronted with it now. Does he admit his mistakes? Does he fall on his sword and communicate to his 8.5 million followers on his podcast that, oh, I had it all wrong? These are actually committed professionals dedicated to this country, which is what the FBI is.
I don't want to be hyperbolic, but are political leanings that might influence the way someone behaves in a role like an FBI agent or somebody who's charged with the security of this country, the enemy of the security of this country?
Well, I would know because politics never entered into it. It's kind of, I joke about it, but it's true. It's like going into a good Irish pub. No politics and no religion are discussed. It's just not considered appropriate for what you're doing. You conduct legal investigations based on the law. You conduct operations and arrests based on your mission, not based on any bias you may have. It's just factually inaccurate. And again, I'm not some liberal telling you this. I am like many other FBI agents, committed veteran, committed national security servant, and we're just committed to protecting this country and securing the Constitution.